You are listening to the Marc Guzman podcast experience. Welcome to another episode of Ask Marc Anything. We've got a few really good questions here, and let's just jump right into it. And yeah, let's do it.
All right, awesome. So our first question of the day is, what is an easy way for me to remember the two sides of the Prop 10 vote?
Okay. So Prop 10 is the Costa-Hawkins Repeal Act. It's got a different name to it, but essentially that's what it is. So to remember both sides, if you vote yes on Prop 10, you want Costa-Hawkins to disappear. If you want Costa-Hawkins to stay, you want to vote no on Prop 10. Now, to give you a little background, because a lot of people hear, and it's got a fancy name. It's got something like an Affordable Housing Act or something like that, but essentially it gets rid of the Costa-Hawkins Act. Now, if you hear Costa-Hawkins Act, what is it? It's not really a fancy name, and I believe it was named after the original people who sponsored the bill. Not entirely sure. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the case. What is Costa-Hawkins? So, what Costa-Hawkins does is it prevents rent control from being placed on anything built after 1996, okay, January 1st of 1996, and it prevents rent control from being placed on single-family homes, condos, and townhomes. So that's essentially what it does. If it gets repealed, meaning if most people vote yes on Prop 10 and it passes, Costa-Hawkins gets repealed. What this then allows for cities like Richmond, Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco to do is then enact an expansion of their current rent control ordinance that then makes rent control apply to single-family homes, condos, and townhomes. Berkeley's prepared to do this. I believe Oakland is. San Francisco right now is in talks of how to plan for it in case it passes. So most likely, if Prop 10 passes, rent control will be placed on single-family homes, condo, and townhomes. Now, there's going to be less tax revenue going to the state of California and to local jurisdictions because of this, and it's already estimated millions and millions of dollars being lost by the Legislative Analyst Office. The main reason being is that if someone is living at a property, let's say it's a house, and the landlord, the property owner, cannot raise the rents to market or keep up with market rents, and they can only raise it based on rent control levels, then if they ever want to sell the property is not going to be worth as much as if the property is vacant. And so what that happens is if the property is worth less, there's going to be less in property taxes. And at the end of the day, there's going to be public services that are hurt because of rent control. There's plenty of studies, and without getting into all the details, but plenty of studies that rent control just simply does not work. So to continue expanding rent control is really not the solution. Now, I fully understand the reason why rent control sounds great, but it just simply doesn't work in open markets. There's a reason why many states in the United States have made rent control illegal, because it simply does not work, and there's no proof that it does work. In fact, if you look at the cities with the highest rents throughout the state of California, most of them have rent control in place. San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, Richmond rents are really high now. I mean, it's crazy. I rented out a 2-bedroom for $2,300 in Richmond, and that's just a 2-bedroom home that a couple years ago would have rented $1,500, $1,600. So what happens is with rent control, it really encourages people to stay in their rent control unit. With that, it limits the amount of inventory that comes onto the market. So the only inventory that's on the market, because of the high demand, prices go up. Supply drops, demand is high, you have increase in prices. It's simple economy 101, and unfortunately, rent control doesn't work. There has to be some kind of in-between compromise, and there's no proof that rent control goes to help low-income families, which is the biggest argument for rent control, is that you want to keep rents low enough so that low-income families are not displaced. But there's plenty of cases, even featured by the Chronicle and local news channels, where there's people that own homes in the Bay Area, but they keep their rent control apartment in Oakland or San Francisco basically as a vacation spot to not pay the hotel cost. They just go stay in their $900 apartment in San Francisco whenever they want to. So there's no proof, or there's no way that rent control, the way it's set up right now, there's no way they can guarantee it goes to help low income families, and that's a big issue. If there was some kind of way where rent control applies, but it does not apply once you make above a certain dollar amount in income, then at that point, I think you'll have a lot more support behind it, especially from landlords, because then it becomes very reasonable and makes sense. And not many, most landlords are reasonable. They're not these big greedy landlords that just want to, nickel and dime everyone for rent. So going back to Prop 10, if you vote yes for Prop 10, you're asking for Costa-Hawkins to be repealed, meaning rent control cities can expand rent control to single-family homes and condos and townhomes. If you vote no, you essentially want everything to stay status quo.
All right, and speaking of landlords, this is a question I saw in an interview with a South Bay landlord this morning in the Mercury News. What is the most common misconception renters and tenant advocates have about landlords?
The biggest misconception? That's a good question. I'm curious to see what you said Mercury News?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the final poll, the data that they ended up with. But based on my own circles, what I see online, what I see and hear from people I talk to, the biggest misconception is that landlords are greedy, that landlords are always raising rents, that landlords don't want to make repairs, and that all landlords are extremely wealthy. I guess that's actually four misconceptions there, but essentially they all tie in with each other, and that's simply not true. So many of my clients, as a property manager, I see this day in, day out, both sides, from the tenants and landlords. And many landlords inherit properties. Many landlords save up a lot of money and cut back on their expenses to buy their first initial investment property, which could be a house, it could be a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex. In some cases, I have a client right now that's shopping around for their first home to buy, but instead of buying a single family home, they want to buy a duplex or a triplex because they're going to live in one of the units, rent out the other ones. They do that for 2 or 3 years. They can go out, do it again, and buy another building. And before you know it, after 10 to 15 years, you own 15 to 20 units by doing that same process. So that's how you can easily build up wealth in real estate over time. But many landlords depend on the rents to come in because they also have a mortgage. So if you're a tenant and you're paying $2,000 a month in rent, that doesn't mean the owner, the landlord, is netting $2,000 a month in rent. There's usually a property management fee, there's repairs, there's a mortgage, there's property taxes, there's any additional bonds and assessments that a city may pass. There's a lot of different variables that go into it, and if you end up with a vacancy, now you have no money coming in, and you still have all these expenses. So I think the number of properties owned by large corporations, wealthy investors, are very small. Most investors are going to be your small mom and pop. They own 1 or 2 investment properties at the most. It's not common when I have a new client that they are bringing me 2 or 3 buildings or properties or even homes. Most people that come to me for assistance in property management, they have 1 home. They may have 1 duplex, 1 triplex, 1 fourplex, and that's it. That's the majority of the property owners as far as landlords. So I would say that's probably the biggest misconception. But everyone that I deal with understands that keeping tenants happy is key. I know there's bad landlords out there, slumlords, and they get into the news very quickly. I understand that, and to be honest, I don't work with any of those people. If there's a habitability repair that needs to be done, I'm presenting bids, proposals, explaining it to the property owner. If they don't want to make these repairs, I fire them. It's that simple. I fire them as a client. I just don't deal with them because they're not the type of clients I want to deal with. But I've had to fire maybe 2 or 3 clients over a 10-year period. That's not many bad landlords. Most landlords want to make the repairs. Most landlords understand by keeping the tenants happy, they're going to reduce the number of tenant turnovers, which increases the investment performance. The best way I explain it is that if you think about a business, right? If you own a business, what's the number one model that everyone talks about? Is that your customers are always right. Your customers are number one priority. Well, think about it from a landlord perspective. Tenants are purchasing your services of providing housing. Tenants are your number one customer. So it only makes sense to keep them happy because that then keeps your business running good. So did they come out and say what the biggest misconception was?
So the person they talked to in the Mercury News, it was San Jose landlord Gustavo Gonzalez, and this is just literally it was a Ask a Landlord segment they had in their real estate section, and his answer is pretty much the same as yours, is that they're greedy. Mm-hmm. And that they're all looking for the dollar, but in reality, they're all normal people just like us trying to make a living for their family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you think about investing, and here's the funny thing. A lot of people don't, especially if your job provides you a 401k. If you look at your paycheck, a section of your money is going toward 401k. Essentially, you're paying into an investment. Well, if you don't have a 401k or if you have extra money to invest, you're probably not going to invest in stocks or 401k. You could, but maybe if you feel as if it's unsafe, you may want to invest in real estate. So it's just another investment vehicle. It's not the end-all be-all for investments, but some people choose to invest money in real estate. And by keeping up a good investment, you get highest returns. And just like investing in good companies, when you're buying stock, you want a good company that's going to be running well, because a poorly run company, you're going to lose your money.
All right, and our last question is, this is going off a recent trend that was on Twitter. It's Unpopular Opinions. So simply put, what is your most unpopular Star Wars opinion?
Unpopular Star Wars opinion. You know, I've kind of been on the bandwagon the last few months that the rebels are actually terrorists in the whole Star Wars universe. And a lot of people don't like to hear that because everyone cheers for the rebels, for the rebellion, for Luke and Leia and all the good guys. But think about this. The Empire is the government. The Empire employs, I mean, they're building the Death Star, and as bad of a weapon that is, I mean, if you think about our countries in this world when they're building nuclear weapons and they're still building bad things, but you have scientists, you have people that put it together, you have people in the military.
It's creating jobs.
It's creating jobs, right?
That's what we all like, jobs.
Exactly. And so you have this Death Star that's employing thousands and thousands of people. What did they say, like 25,000 or 50,000?
No, I'm sure it's a lot. I mean, the thing, it's the size of a small moon.
Yeah. So you have all these people that are normal, everyday people working in their specialties. You have janitors, you have cooks, you have dentists, you have all these people just simply doing what they want to do as far as their occupation, and they're working on the Death Star. Yet here come the rebels and blow up 2 Death Stars.
I mean, who knows how many innocent construction lives were lost in those 2 attacks.
Exactly. Everyone there was really an innocent life except your very top few villains in the movie. But can you compare them to some top government people? I'm sure you can make some comparisons there, especially in today's political
there
climate.
are definitely some comparisons that you can make.
Right? So there's an argument to be made for the fact that it may be possible that the rebels are really terrorists. And so I think that's probably my most unpopular opinion right now of Star Wars, because every time I mention that to people, people get so upset. No, no, that's wrong. It's the Empire. They're evil and this and that. But evil, good and evil is very subjective. That's what people fail to understand.
I guess you could also say that if you sign up to work on the Death Star for a Sith Lord, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Like,
not really, because remember after episode 3 when they wiped out Revenge of the Sith, when they wiped out all the Jedi and the Jedi went to hiding, all of a sudden they had a stable government. There was no more battling back and forth. And then the rebellion pops up. And in fact, the rebellion wasn't as big and powerful until it got closer to like the Star Wars animated series Rebels, that led up to Rogue One, that led up to episode 4. And now you have the Rebels getting much stronger, building support. And if you think about it, coming from the outer skirts of the Star Wars galaxy and universe,
yeah,
that they're building support to come in. It's very interesting. There's a lot of similarities you can compare.
One I saw that I thought was kind of funny was Anakin was saving the younglings from becoming rebel terrorists in episode 3 when he went to the Jedi Temple.
That's interesting.
It's kind of a dark mist, unpopular theory, but
yeah, and that's a little. I would probably not agree with that, just because that was the initial takeover, and because they were so young, you don't quite know if they would have really turned up to be the terrorists if you go with the plot that rebels are and the Jedi are terrorists. But yeah, it's always fun to talk about that stuff.
I guess an unpopular opinion I would have is, well, outside the universe, my unpopular opinion is that Last Jedi is the best Star Wars movie ever made. I get attacked by that one all the time. I'll ride to that one until a better movie comes out.
That was a really good movie. And really, you get attacked a lot by that?
Oh, yeah. Whenever I say Last Jedi was a great movie, I get all sorts of weird stares and what are you even talking about? And you know what? Come at me with it. You know, it was. I tell people it was everything Star Wars needed to wash away the old and create a whole new, greater, bigger universe that it lives in.
Yeah, but see, you're a lot younger too than many of the people, actually than any of the people that originally saw Star Wars and the original trilogy. And what happens is people get nostalgic with like what they grew up with.
I agree. I think the trilogy that you grew up with is the one you like the most. Like, for me, I love the prequels. Are they better than the originals? No, but I still love them. They're still great movies. They're still great Star Wars movies.
You know what? It reminds me a little bit of the argument, was Michael Jordan really the best basketball player ever? And if you talk to someone who grew up with Michael Jordan and grew up in that area and really looked up to him, yeah, they will argue up and down. But then you have people today that argue, no, it's Curry or it's LeBron or it's someone else.
Well, I think,
they argue. But it's usually LeBron or Curry. Some people even said Kobe, the best basketball player. But that's also because they grew up with this.
It's always the best ones are always the ones from when you were a kid or when it was your era.
Correct, yeah.
So.
And then if you look at some of the videos, there's a YouTube video that's really great where they looked at the defense that Kobe, LeBron, Curry have to play against right now compared to some of the defense that Michael Jordan had to play against. And it's actually pretty laughable. I don't know if this was a selectively picked like highlights of Michael Jordan or if the highlights represented what Michael Jordan really was up against back in the day. But if it really represented what he was up against back in the day, the defense sucked back then compared to the way it is now.
I mean, we can go on all day comparing eras. I mean, it's the same argument when people make the Brady-Montana comparison.
Yeah.
You know, it's just when you look at different eras, there's different rules. But I think every trilogy has its own, you know, something special about it. You know, the original trilogy was its own great story and spectacle. The prequels, it was all about, I think, more special effects driven and about the action. Which I enjoyed. And then now they're trying to, in these most recent movies, I think they're trying to get it more plot-focused again.
Yeah, and see, I grew up with knowing about Star Wars and just being able to watch these Star Wars movies well after it was already popular, right? And so when did the original Episode 1 come out?
New Hope.
No, episode 1.
Oh, Phantom Menace, 99.
So that was 99. Okay, so I was entering high school when that first came out.
I think I was a year younger than Jake Lloyd.
Okay.
In that one, so that's why I enjoyed Phantom Menace, is I was essentially in the same age group as Anakin was in that movie. So like to me as a kid, it related to me.
Yeah, and for me too, because I really enjoyed Star Wars, but all I had were the old movies. And when that came out, I was like, oh, this is badass. This is very cool that they're coming out with episode 1, 2, and 3. And I was in high school, so I thought it was the best. I thought the prequels were great, but so many people hated them. But yeah, that's because you love the original trilogy. And yeah, now looking back, if you make the comparison, yeah, there were a whole bunch of CGI effects and everything, but you still enjoyed the movies. I still watch them every now and then. They're very enjoyable. There's a story.
They're hard to turn off.
Yeah. So
I always say this, the worst Star Wars movie is still better than like 85% of all movies ever made. So
True.
There you go.
Awesome. So thank you for watching or listening to another Ask Mark Anything. Today is Friday the 28th. Have a great weekend. Enjoy it. Stay safe. Have fun. I can't believe October 1st is on Monday, and we've got 3 more months and 3 big holidays coming up with Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, actually 4 with New Year's, and so many holidays coming up.
It's that time of year.
Yeah. It comes by so fast every year. So enjoy it and have a great weekend. I really, really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.